Okay, so we're going to learn how to make assemblies, which basically tell us how to combine multiple parts together. How would they be assembled or attached or connected to each other? So we're going to make this assembly here. It consists of 3 parts. One is this cylinder here, one's the cylinder here, and one's this rectangular prism. And I want to make it so this rectangular prism here can rotate. This cylinder can also rotate. It's just kind of hard to tell that it is rotating. See, there's a little difference in the shading just because it's a cylinder. It looks the same from all angles, but this cylinder here is fixed just from how I did that. So to look at that, we have to make an assembly file. We've got to start with our individual part files first. So I'm going to show you what these I have one cylinder here that I have made with a diameter of 5 and a height of 2. I have another cylinder here with a diameter of 3. This is actually my starting cylinder, or what I'm going to call part 1. For this has a diameter of 3 and a height of 5. A height of 1. And I have this rectangular prism, which I have made 4 by 2 in one direction, and then its other direction lengthwise is by 2 inches long extruded. Okay, so those are my parts. Right now I'm going to delete this points because I'll show you how to make it later. I want to make them into assembly together, so I'm going to say File, and I'm going to say New. You could make an assembly from part if you already had it open, but I'm going to do this so I can choose my order of parts. Okay, when I say begin assembly, it wants components to be inserted. So I want to go find my part files if I don't already see them in here. I want to start with this cylinder, that's part 1, and see it can move wherever until I click on this green check mark. That will fix it in space at the origin. Okay, so when I click on that, now part here can't move. It says it's fixed. I'm going to insert some more components. So I'm going to go find my second cylinder, and I don't want to click the green check mark here because that will fix it at the origin. I want to define how these are going to be attached to each other with what's called mates, and I'll talk about those in a second. So I'm going to place this right now just somewhere in space. I'm not clicking on this green check mark. So here it is placed. I'm going to insert another component that is my rectangular prism, and it gets placed again in space, not fixed from it. That green check mark fixes thing in space. These guys can move, this guy cannot, he's fixed. Okay, with mates, what looks like this paper clip here, I'm going to define how these parts are going to be attached together. So I'm first, I don't know what that was attached to, going to mate between the face of this cylinder and the face of this cylinder. And when I do that and tell them to be coincident, really just means that the faces have to lie along the same plane. Say the green check mark to accept it. A line along the same plane doesn't mean much because it kind of looks like I can still move them around. It is keeping them on the plane. It doesn't move like directly above it if I look at it, but it still is not much help into fixing this in space more. So to define this a little more, I'm going to define the edge of this part has to also line up with this edge. And I don't want them to overlap like this. In SolidWorks, parts can overlap. It doesn't recognize that they're touching each other unless you do something special from it. I'd like this to go the other way around so it's not overlapping with that cylinder. So I'm going to change my mate alignment. Depends on how you made yours. I want mine to look like that. So that's what I'm going to start with. Okay. There are my cylinders. I'm going to kind of look at them from this angle. I want to attach this rectangular prism to this small cylinder here. So I'm going to mate now this face of my rectangular prism and keep up with which way that looked like to this face. Again, telling them to be coincident is the default. But again, that just lies along the same plane. This rectangular prism can still move an awful lot just won't go through this part now that they're lying on the same plane. To make them defined more, I'm going to define a point to actually be coincident. So points being coincident is more constraining than faces being coincident in a mate. So to do that, I want to really mate from a point that's my origin, the center of that cylinder there. See how it's highlighted in orange when I hover over the origin over here, and a center of this rectangular prism. But I don't have a good point to mate to this here. So I have to make a reference point for that, which means I've got to go back into my part file. So I'm going to right click on it, say open part. And I started on this side, which actually got flipped. So I need to make my point on this face. I'm going to make a reference point at the center of this face, tell it OK. And then when I go back to my assembly file, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's make sure it's 0.2. Okay. Say yes and save it. And then in this assembly file, now I have this point. It may prompt you to say to update that file. Depends on what you need to do from it. So now I have a reference point here. I can mate between these. So I'm going to mate between, I can't find it when I hover over it in that space, which is kind of annoying, but I can find it down here, my reference. So here's that point and the origin, which if I want to look at it from another view to make sure that's what I wanted, that's my origin. Make sure those are on the faces you want. Since I already mated those faces, I couldn't have my point over here on the other face. Those being coincident means those actual points have got to stay touching. That's a much more constrained mate than coincident faces. Okay, when that's done, you should notice that now my rectangular prism, if I click and drag on it, can rotate. This cylinder rotates. Kind of see how the shadowing here tilts? But this guy does not rotate. It's the one that's fixed. But by mating both that point and that face, if I just made the point, it'd be a little different. I've gotten the constraint I want. So let's play with this for a second. If I delete that mate, then see my rectangular prism can go inside. That's not what I wanted. So again, that mate helps keep those planes. That face and this face. So that's what I want. Okay, so that's your first introduction to assemblies. Good luck, guys.